Hello, and welcome to the Green Team of the Legendarium, the weird little spin off podcast where patrons of the Legendarium cover books and topics the main crew hasn't gotten around to yet. I'm Little Red Book, and tonight I have with me our floppy eared friend, Colonel Rabbit.
Hello.
And we also have with us our mustachioed member of the main crew, Todd Wente.
Greetings.
We'll be discussing the first two novellas in the Penric and Desdemona series by Lois McMaster Bujold. These novellas take place between Hollowed Hunt and Curse of Chalion. It follows a young man on his way to his betrothal feast who stumbles upon a dying temple sorceress. He accidentally finds himself in possession of her demon. Hijinks ensue. Before we get started, what are your overall impressions of these stories? Todd.
I got a kick out of them. Being used to the world of the five gods. I was anticipating a significantly more serious-minded entry, and these were just fun. I had a good time reading them. Laughed a lot.
Yeah, I have to say, every time I read a Penric and Des novel, I will have a smile on my face probably like 50% of the time.
I think that this is really where Bujold shows her comedic chops.
Yes.
And they have some serious moments, but they're just, like you said, they're just so much fun. Penn has this really old demon that has like 10 women, a mayor, and a lioness, and they're all in his head talking. And it's compared to a council of older sisters that harass him and nag him, but also play mean pranks on him at times.
So funny.
Yeah, it's so funny. This is this world of the five gods. So there's a lot of Deus Ex Machina. Are you guys okay with that?
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, for first of all, it's one of the best theologies in fantasy that I've read. So, like, if you have that theology, of course use it.
The one thing that I have found very interesting on this is that even the demons who supposedly come from hell are overseen by a god that is really quite approachable. I get a kick out of the bastard.
As approachable as the gods are.
Well, yeah. They may not find them approachable, but everybody else seems to not have. You know, they're in awe and they're somewhat nervous about it, but these are not gods that they're very reminiscent of the idea of deities from the Belgariad. They are approachable. They are as human, but mostly beneficent as any other characters. They just happen to have supremely advanced powers and the wise sense to not meddle in earthly affairs any more than absolutely necessary. I really have enjoyed them.
It's not even so much that they're limited also. So they are they need a human being to act through. Which I really like. Because I think that if you take the concept of God, any God, seriously, you realize that that the only way God really does act in the world is through us, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't want to get too super religious. I find it, but I do find the theology pretty Catholic in its sense.
Yeah.
I don't know that Bujold is a Catholic, but it does feel very informed by Catholicism.
Yeah, certainly a medieval Catholicism.
Yes.
But a little less. It feels a little less repressed.
Yes.
if I may use that phraseology,
without
without trying to be condescending or rude or insensitive or any of those kinds of things, but I find it very approachable, a very approachable deification system.
Yes. So how do you feel about how these stories deal with exposition? Do you ever so, what I'm getting at here is, do you ever feel like Captain Exposition shows up? If you know what I mean? Like, you have this character and he just because I feel like she does it very well, like, it's told the exposition, the what's going on is told in little vignettes and little stories that are natural conversation.
Yeah.
Maybe this is just something I should cut.
No, it's like, well, so the one thing I noticed is that unlike what she usually does, there's a few points in these stories where she actually does out of POV narration, where she'll tell a story about something like not the POV character won't know, and it's just as an exposition for readers, and that allows her to kind of put out like some of that uh, filler stuff, like you would see like a character having to explain things they already know, or creating an actual conversation just to explain these things that the readers need.
Yeah, for me, the one thing that the time that becomes the time that I find myself criticizing the use of that tool is if it pulls me out of the flow of the read. And while like you were saying, Rabbit, where there are a couple of places where she does that, they did not feel so egregious or so off-putting that they pulled me out of the story. They felt like they were a woven part of the story that so and so's. It almost felt more like so and so's remembering some bits of pieces that they'd heard somewhere along the line, and you need to know this for the future. But let's go back to the story real quick. Kind of like the uncle in Princess Bride, played by
Yeah.
Peter Falk. You remember that?
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot how those felt.
Yeah. And it really works well because so many of the point of view characters are scholars or knowledgeable people, so those kind of stories being in their back brain makes a lot of sense.
It's kind of the same with, even the way Des and Penn interact at the very beginning. Like, Des is kind of the scholar and Penn's this poor kid who just ended up with a demon. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it just works really well. So, okay, these are really short stories. The first 2 books are Penric's Demon and Penric and the Shaman. And we're gonna just start out with, like, when we introduce each story, we're just gonna do spoilers because they're really short.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Okay.
And there's not too
A
much
yo
to spoil either.
a young man finds himself possessed and is sent to Martin's Bridge and the local wrangler of sorcerers. Isolated and confused, he discovers that his newly acquired demon speaks in the voices of 10 women, a lioness, and a mare. He names his demon, and he begins learning from her. He finds himself kidnapped for Desdemona, only to escape and find himself ambushed by the saint. In the end, he makes a deal with the bastard, both to serve him and Des. So, what do you guys think about the concept of uphill versus downhill magic?
Rabbit, you go
Uh,
first.
it's a very nice formalization of a common concept in both life and fantasy. It's easier to destroy than it is to create. I love how much like of all of Bujold's magic in this world is just kind of based on like almost like folklore. It's like things, intuitive truths about the world that people kind of understand, and this fits really well into that.
Yeah, so this weekend I went for a long walk with a longtime mentor of mine, and we discussed magic systems at length. And when I say at length, I mean about 8 miles of walking of magic systems. And one of the things that we talked about was the idea of how much energy it must take to do certain things, bringing things to greater organization versus making things more chaotic, breaking them down. And so this idea of uphill or downhill magic fit very nicely into that. As we were talking about it, I found myself thinking very much about Desdemona saying, "Oh no, that's very easy to do. That's just downhill magic. I don't have to worry about that very hard at all." As she kills off fleas all over the place, it was quite delightful.
And you even get some of that in the Hallowed Hunt, where Helena says, if I don't leave soon, I'm gonna have to start in on the mice, and I like mice.
Yes.
Yeah.
I So I love the scene where she's destroying the poison in his mouth, and he has to swallow it anyway.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then so he gets kidnapped by a priest and his brother who want to steal Desdemona by killing him. And then she turns the knives into rust.
Mhm.
It's so great. It's such a fun scene. And then she lights the whole castle on fire. Like Rabbit said, it's easier to destroy. And
Yes.
I actually never quite thought about it that way. So thank you, Rabbit. You gave me a new
Yeah.
insight. You're so smart.
And
How do
some
you guys
things.
so what do you guys think about the interactions between Des and Penn?
What not to love.
They're so great. They're so
Yeah.
great. When he names her, it's such a touching moment because she's
Mhm.
like, "They just call me demon."
Yeah.
And it's interesting too because it gives the idea that there are multiple voices, and I guess voices works for me very very easily. Multiple voices that he is hearing, but he can separate them all, and he needs a name. Uh, this idea of personification, it changes the relationship between them in a way that probably, if he had gone through the effort of being schooled first, probably rule one is never name your demon. And,
Something like that for sure.
and
Well,
he does it right
I
off
don't,
the bat.
it's not necessarily rule one, but it's like if all of the language about talking about demons is about rider and mount. It's about talking
Right.
about them like an animal. Like
Yeah.
they're just a beast to work with, not a partner.
Any
But
wonder then that they become angry and ascendant and take over
Yeah.
you?
And I think that's part of what Tigny shows a counterpoint for is just
yeah.
he just treats the demons like tools.
And of course,
Digny's a tool.
yes. And Des even calls him a demon destroyer because he did something stupid and lost his demon.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
she just
Yeah.
holds him in
What do you
contempt.
what do you want to bet that he just treated it poorly and demon's like I
Right.
don't want to deal with this.
I also like how they kind of, especially as the series goes on, they leak into each other.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So um she gives him language. Uh she and knowledge. And like the scene where she gives him directions and the daughter's guards are really
Yeah.
super confused. She's like, "No, just turn this way and then this way." A- And then he does things like he takes a bath, he brushes his hair, he makes
Mhm.
himself look nice, he wears nice clothes. And it just brings her pleasure that the way he takes care of himself. So they take care of each other.
Mhm.
And it's just delightful how you have this sweet, innocent young man. He just wants to help. He ends up with a demon, and then he just wants to help the demon. And it's so sweet. He's a good kid.
Yes.
He is a good kid. He reminds me very much. I have a son currently on a mission for our church in Zimbabwe, and as I'm reading the story, I can totally see my son, little blonde hair. He's also blonde, completely trying to figure out stuff, and he's like, "Yeah, I don't know. I don't really know what I'm doing yet, but I'm having a good time at it."
Yep.
And I can see this very innocent 19-year-old going through all of these experiences. And maybe that's me being sentimental, but it felt very much I could see my son in all of this going on. Hopefully, my son doesn't have a demon inside him, but other than that,
I can't imagine you being sentimental at all, Todd. That does not sound like you.
well, let's be fair. This podcast might not get me sentimental because there's nothing to cry about.
Oh, I did cry. I did cry once, which I totally forgot about, but that's in the next story. So, any
We'll
other
wait.
thoughts and just what?
we'll wait to talk about it.
I don't know if I'll cry. I cried while I was reading it. Any other thoughts you want to add just to the general discussion before we get into quotes?
So I want to go back a little bit to Bujold's sense of humor and her ability to weave it seamlessly. I loved how this first story kept coming back to cheese.
Yes.
Pen gets sent off on this expedition, and she says, "Well, I'm not going to marry you, but here's a wheel of cheese." And he's like, "Oh, well, thanks." He goes to what is it, Middlebridge or whatever, and they're exporting silk, and he says, "Well, it's probably better than exporting cheese." I mean, everything keeps coming back to cheese in this story. I was like, did she give herself a challenge that she has to weave cheese through this whole thing? It made me chuckle every time it was brought up.
Yeah.
She is so funny. I think the thing that you're referring to is that that they export soldiers. And there's riches in the exporting soldiers, but as much riches for the soldiers as for the cheeses.
Yep.
Yeah, and at the dinner, when he's kidnapped, he's like, "Thank God it's meat instead of cheese."
Over and over again.
Just going back to the very beginning of the story, I feel so bad for Penn. He's like, just this. He was just like, "Hey, I'm going to marry this sweet girl and I'm going to do right by my family." And then he is completely cut off from human contact, like physically anyway. And the way it's handled in the story is pretty lighthearted, but the idea that his whole life is going one direction. I mean, he even says, she's like, "I don't want to marry a man who can light me on fire." And he's like, "I wanted to light you on fire with kisses."
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny and sad, and it's just very sweet. But I do feel bad for him. He even at one point mentions that nobody has touched him. And that's such a important part of human, like, just giving somebody a hug is so important to human beings.
Yeah.
We're just designed for that, so.
That's part of what makes you like him so much, is that he takes all that and just tries to make the best out of it.
Yeah. For sure. So, favorite quotes, favorite scenes?
One that I found, it was one that I had marked, but I also found it as I was going through and looking. I often go to Goodreads and see if people similar quotes that I had marked. And one of them was the one where he said, "Sorcery had certainly not been on Penn's former list of scholarly ambitions, but neither had theologian, divine, physician, teacher, lawyer, or any other high trade out there." This poor kid, he's like, "Yeah, well, okay, I'll take this one."
Yeah. I think I have the obvious capstone quote of the book at the very end, like almost at the last line, when they're talking about Penn is asking Des if she wants to go with him to seminary school, and she says, "You looked to God in the eyes and spoke for me. There's nothing in my power I would ever refuse you after that."
Yeah, that was good. I do think also the old man, the old crotchety dude with the gray hair that sat in the back of the room. The one where he said, "Well, I think Cleve has stopped lying," and the guy looks up and he's like, "Huh," and looks back down. He came in very briefly, but a great character.
All of the saint characters and like the side magical characters, like Helena in Hollow Hunt, is another great side character. The audiobook, Grover Gardner just did his voice so well.
He did.
It was really quite well done.
By the way, I want to say that Grover Gardner is one of my very favorite audiobook readers. he is amazing. And
Agreed.
sometimes I will turn on books that he reads to go to sleep to because I just love his voice. I'll turn it way down so I can just hear like his voice, but not really understand. And anyway, he puts me to sleep.
Awesome.
So
hopefully he's listening and he hears that as a high compliment.
Yeah. I mean,
Like,
I guess
if
you
he's
could say
listening, he's found 2 fans for life.
I mean, I've even fallen asleep to The Stand because he reads The Stand.
Wow.
I guess you could say I sleep with Grover Gardner.
There's no one to deny that or contradict. So, okay.
I don't have a favorite quote, but I like the part when he confronts the god, or the god confronts him, and he gets on his knees and he says, I just want to serve Des, and I want to serve you. And then as the saint's like, fine, the god won't take her. And Tig's all mad. And then he gets up and he's like, he's walking towards the door and he says, that one lies and that one tells the truth. And by the way, you've sworn yourself to the god's service. And Tig is just so mad. He's just sputtering. And the saint's like, good luck working this out.
Yeah. The saint is so done with Tigny.
I don't think he's a bad guy. He's just
he's a functionary. He's a perfect functionary.
Yeah.
He has not been taught that there's a better way to life. And he's never realized it. He's
a paper pusher. And he's probably a little bit bitter about the fact that he lost his demon.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
Well, and I would assume scarred by that too. Right?
Probably.
Like he's seen everything that can go wrong when a demon ascends. So, I mean, he would not want that to happen to a 19-year-old kid that just caught a demon out of chance.
Right. Well, and the interesting thing about Des is she has no desire to ascend because she has seen demons removed by saints. And so she's like, I don't want any part of that. I'd like to stay in this world, please. And thanks.
Yep.
Moving on. I'm once again going to try to read a summary I wrote. 4 years later, full-fledged sorcerer divine Penric is translating Ruchia's medical text from one of the 6 languages he inherited from Des in his comfy post as court sorcerer for the Princess Archdivine. An investigator from the court or from Eastholm arrives to Martin's Bridge, seeking help to find a rogue shaman and possible murderer. Des is thrilled, Pen is intrigued, and they join the hunt. It leads them into the mountain passes where they discover the ghost of a dead shaman and their prey. Penric hears Ingles's confession, helps him to rediscover his warped shamanic gift, and brings him safely back into the fold. So, what do you guys think about the fact that we have 3, but arguably 4 points of view instead of just 1?
I will say one of my favorite, I guess, literary tools in fantasy is seeing my favorite protagonists, main characters, whatever, from other people's point of view. So seeing what Inglis and Greyjay think of
Oswald.
Penric, Oswald, seeing what they think of Penric is so fun. Yeah,
there's a maturity that we are given to understand that Penric has undergone, but that maturity, how much of that maturity is based on him living with a near 200-year-old demon? By the way, so inappropriate to give away someone's age. I loved that moment.
That was a great line.
That's rude to tell someone a woman's age, Penric. And he's like, whatever. But there's a maturity that shows up in him in surprising times and surprising ways. And when we see that from the other characters, they're like, well, okay, he's a kid. He gets on a horse real good, but wait a minute, where is this where is this wisdom that he's supposed to have coming from? He's not very confident, and yet he gets all these. It's a beautiful juxtaposition of the innocence that he's trying to hang on to and still connected with because he's so young, and the obvious wisdom that comes from having access to all of that extra information. And I don't think we'd be able to see it as clearly from inside as we do from outside. So that was a cool tool.
Yeah, I like how, I mean, I even said earlier in the podcast, Desmond and Penric are bleeding into each other. From the inside, what you're hearing is a conversation, which I love the conversation, by the way, that they have with each other. From the outside, they're like, how is he even he's pulling it out of his butt, they think.
Yeah.
You know, like,
Well,
where's it even coming from?
Alternatively, where is it coming from? And is he insane?
Yeah,
That too.
yeah.
That too, for sure. I also really like, we basically have 3 mysteries going on. One is the murder mystery, if you could call it that, or the missing person mystery. Then you have the mystery of Ingles. He's looking for a way to get out of his situation. And then you have the mystery of, how are we going to fix this ghost problem that we have? And guess 4, because how did we all end up together in this situation at this point? And I love it. I love it, love it, love it.
Yeah, the different and each of the people are focused on their own solution. Penric is the only one that is open to the moment. Everybody else has an agenda, and Penric is like, yeah, well, maybe we should stay here for an extra day. Maybe we should ask around. Maybe we should try a couple things. He's very much that's a skill that I am trying to develop a little more, of being in the moment and not worry about agendas and all kinds of other things that are going to happen later. Everybody else seems to be focused on, no, we need to be elsewhere quickly. And Penn's like, no, we really don't. I think we're good here.
we can all stand to have a little more pen in ourselves.
Yeah. Well, and the way that Oswald responds to it all the time with a glare, it's just delightful.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. But I also like the explanation he gives for why he feels that way.
Yes.
Which is that they heard of some sorcery, because they're discussing sorcery, and he showed up too late, and the town had already burned the woman.
Yeah.
And that's his biggest fear, is that he's going to be too late. So even though you want to be like Penn, you can also understand why Oswald is the way he is. Like,
sure,
life is on the line.
Yep.
So,
yeah.
And speaking of a really good way of dealing with exposition, that whole scene, you get through a natural conversation. Go ahead, Todd.
Yeah. Oh, when he says, when Penn says he thought maybe he should encourage him, but then he decided to hold off. I think all of us have been in those moments where we're listening to somebody and we're like, can I help this along? I'll just wait. Very relatable. Very relatable.
Yeah, and speaking of a great moment where you're inside Penn's head and Des is like, just shh. And you figure out why he seems so wise, because Des is like, shut up, or calm down.
I've done this before, kid. Sit down, shut up, you'll be fine.
Yeah, right. Oh, the further you go in the series, the more bossy Des gets. In a lot of respects.
I believe that.
In a good way.
Yeah. Oh no. I'm not going to spoil later, but
one of the things I do think that is very interesting about this novella is it's a good example of a story without a villain.
Yeah.
All 3 main characters are protagonists, and they're not even like Tigny from the last one, where they're like, yeah, you're technically good, but you're not really doing anything helpful. They're all working towards a good end and are good people.
Yeah, and the other thing I really like is Ingles. It's just that he's really young and something really terrible happens through unfortunate events and he just panics.
Yeah.
And but he's doing everything he can to keep his friend's ghost from being sundered.
Yeah.
He makes all the wrong decisions. But yeah, like you said, it's not because he's a bad person, he's just freaked out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've never been like that, but, you know.
No,
Freaked
none of
out?
us have ever made mistakes in the moment.
I have never panicked and done something stupid. It's just
Okay, well,
but I understand that other people do that.
I guess I'm the one that's left out because I will admit to having panicked and made really bad decisions in the past.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Me as well.
I'm
for
not
sure.
sharing any of them on the recording though, so don't even
That's
ask.
fair. That's fair. You can tell us off recording. I definitely would not secretly record them and then put them out on the internet.
There you go. There you
No,
go.
we already have our end of episode quip.
Oh dear. Oh dear. Okay. Any other thoughts before we go into quotes?
One of the things that that I liked about this book that was different from the other was there was an earnestness about the village. We don't get a lot of time in the village. We don't get a lot of exposition about who's in the village, but there's this. And maybe it's just me because I'm adding things into it in my own head, but it felt like this was a village that really connected with each other. They helped each other. It's a small town kind of a feeling, and when one of their own has difficulty, they just pull around and support. And so Galen, I guess, as the de facto temple leader for all five, even though it's just a small affair and small details and all these things, but they're right there to help out everything. It felt very much like a pastoral kind of a village where, you know, there even the town drunk is probably a really nice person. It didn't feel at all like it felt almost like Shangri-La or Brigadoon. It didn't feel at all like a normal place, and I just was happy with that. It feels like Oswald was the only person in the place that was kind of grumpy and grouchy. It sounded like everybody else is just delightful. I want to go there. I want to. If that's a real place, I want to go.
I do too.
I do not.
I mean, to be fair, there was the hunters who stole.
Yeah, but they're not really part of the
Inglis's-
village.
True.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're the outsiders that come down and sell furs and go away. We can live with that.
Yeah, but the village itself.
I like how Galen has been there for 30 years, I think it is. A really long time. Although he has little kids, so that's weird. But he knows that. Does anybody remember the shaman's name?
Squola.
Squola?
Squola, yeah.
Squala? I don't know.
Squola.
Whatever. He knows that this dude is a hedge shaman. He knows he's not supposed to be technically doing what he's doing. Technically. But at the same time, he's like much more worried about this guy's soul than he is about whether or not everything he does is orthodox. And further, this guy kind of becomes his right hand. He's the person we send out to deal with problems. He's a pillar of the community, and he's so distressed that Squala has been sundered, and he just he turns a blind eye to some of the less orthodox practices, and I enjoyed that part of the story.
Yeah.
It was part of what. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Rob.
I almost wish that we had gotten Squilla from beforehand. We get a little bit from his ghost, but it's like all the little hints that you get from him make you really wish he had some screen time alive.
Yeah. When he looks at Autumn, the son of Autumn, and he says, "It took you long enough to show up."
Do you got good beer?
It's great.
And then the retort that he gives him when he kind of hesitates and he starts moving toward the God of Autumn, and the God of Autumn looks at him and says, "Well, it took you long enough."
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's all the main points I wanted to get to. Except for I do love the scene. I like one of the things I really enjoy about Oswald is when he's dealing with both Penric and Inglis, just his frustration because he's just this normal person and he's dealing with this shaman and a sorcerer who are scholars, and he's just like all the time like, oh my gosh, there they go again talking about this stuff. I don't even know what they're talking about. And he gets frustrated, and it's just anyway, poor Oswald.
He has a lot going on.
He's so harassed. Okay, so some quotes or moments that really stood out to you.
My favorite was when Inglis is trying to hedge and be like, you guys can't possibly understand what I'm going through and what happened to my shamanic and Penric's like, Inglis, I've had a demon living in my head for 4 years. She's 200 years old, and I'm going to keep having her in my head for my whole life. Try me.
That was a fun moment.
It was great. So, the part where he's talking Inglis out of the temple, and he's like, I have the law's outside, and Inglis is all freaked out, and Penric says, no one is going to hang you on the spot, not without all those judicial ceremonies his order is so fond of. Everyone has to dress up.
Everyone has to dress up.
Everyone has to dress up first.
I got a kick out of the moment where he says, and I can't remember who he was speaking to. I think he was speaking to Inglis when he says, I just have a little difficulty with a god who accepts people whose last words were, "Hold my beer, watch this."
all the seminary school jokes are amazing in that part.
They really are.
They were so much fun. And of course, Oswald the whole time is glowering still.
Right. Yeah, there's one about how oh, never mind. I can't remember it. I can feel it on the edge of my brain, but I can't remember it. They're talking about how whatever his name is that I can't say.
Well,
yes, thank you. Is a great souled man. And Oswald said, I thought those were limited to kings and generals. And Penric says, no, those are just merely great men. They're not great souled men. So I just like
Yeah.
Yeah, it's called calling back to, I think it was Curse Italian when that concept was first brought up.
Yep. Not that Todd would know because he's not cool like us.
No. I've been reading other things.
It's fine.
I did get a kick out of the weaving thread of the fleas continuing to drop off. The one moment where he says he wasn't sure he saw any fleas, but he could hear them falling on the ground.
Right. He's petting the kitten
and the dog.
Yeah.
Or the cat. The cat. Yeah.
Yeah. So the last one is last quote, actual quote, not my last thought, is from Inglis' point of view. And it says, in all of these mountains, he had been the most lost and the most rescued. And hadn't that, and sorry, I got moving post-it notes, and hadn't that been old Qualia's and his band of dogs job? Hand to hand to hand throughout the generations.
Yeah, it was a beautiful kind of a sentiment.
So this
Yeah.
book did make me. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
The whole idea of the chain of shamans, basically putting their trust in each other, even though they don't know each other. It's not like just your apprentice. You have to trust every other shaman that they would come to the rescue of your soul if necessary.
Yeah. So there is a part that makes me cry in this. And it's the part where the father comes and visits Oswald in the middle of the night. And he says, "You were not too late. Well done, my child."
Mhm.
And
And also, it's not going to snow.
it's not going to snow.
Yeah,
Not
you
for
got 3 days.
Yeah.
But this poor man who's been so upset at this one failure, and it's driving his whole life, and his God comes to him and said, "You are not too late. Well done." And I hope I one day hear God say, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." So I don't know that. And he's so mundane, that's not fair, but he denies it to himself until Penn's like, Des is freaking out right now. There's definitely a God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of those quotes, that's another of the quotes that I highlighted when he says, "Do not deny the gods, and they will not deny you." Dangerous habit, mind you. Once they start to let them through that first crack, they're worse than mice.
Yes. And that's
Which,
a callback to Paladin of Souls.
yes. I got a kick out of it. Penric is so down to earth as he's far more down to earth than any other religious figure or most other religious figures that are portrayed in literature. And Bujold does that beautifully throughout her entire series. We've mentioned that before, but that's so many great moments for Penric in this book of doing that.
And one of the things I really enjoy about Penn and Des is after all the heavy stuff with the first 3 books, it's just fun to have some fun
Yeah.
in this world. It's much more day in the life of than the other stories are.
Yeah.
You're not dealing with a kingdom ending curse or an invasion of an army or court politics that will decide the fate of a kingdom. It's just like, here's some people living in the woods. They need some help. And here's Penn and Des to the rescue.
Yep.
I really enjoy that. Just so you know, Todd, the next book we get to meet, or the 3 of them come back together and solve another mystery. Yeah.
Oh, fun.
Yeah. It's a lot of fun.
I might put that on my list and read it sometime after March.
Well, and we will patiently wait for you.
Oh, you're very kind. I appreciate that.
Well, we're not going to wait for you to read it because we're going to read it ourselves, but we will wait to talk about it.
I've already read it like 3 times, so
have I. I will not turn down an excuse to reread Penn and Des.
I will not either. And I really won't have time until at least after January because I'm starting Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell with Megan and Chesky.
Oh, yeah, that'll be fun.
Yeah. And I'll also my side podcast. May I plug my own other podcast?
Yeah.
Okay. Also, I'm Allison on Word Less with Mark, and we explore short fiction in the science fiction and fantasy genres. And you can
Oh,
find us
cool.
at Wordless, 2 words.
Awesome.
Okay. Any last thoughts?
Where we can do ratings or last thoughts
If
in
you
this
want
book
to.
specifically.
For the whole
Yeah.
thing. I don't know. Whatever.
Yeah. we usually do ratings.
I did not ask for ratings. So, how would you rate these books out of 5 stars?
I give these two 4.5 out of 5, only because the other books in the series are better. So it's only 4.5 because I know there's more better to come.
That's kind of cheating, but okay. What about you,
I
Todd?
have to cheat somewhere.
I probably would give them. I'd probably give them a 4. I don't very often give 5s. I think even some of my favorite stuff I wouldn't give a 5 to. It's not because I don't find them enchanting and delightful, but just because I think that I want more. And so maybe if I'm looking at them as an entire group, when we get to the end of all of the Penric and Desdemona material, maybe I'll change my mind. But in my opinion, 4 is a pretty doggone good rating. So,
Look, I've loved books that I've given 2.5 to. So
I'll remember that.
Well, I mean, sometimes you're like, look, this is schmutt, but I like it.
So I read Something from the Dark Side by Simon Green. It is a bad book. It is objectively a bad book. It is so much fun. I loved every second of it. It was. Would you call Army of Darkness a good movie? No, but do you love every moment of it? Yes.
At least every moment starring Bruce Campbell. So yeah, pretty much the whole movie.
I would say I would give these a 4.5. I think that if I really wanted to, I could find some pretty deep themes going on. But I don't really want to because they're fun. So
I think probably go ahead.
I was going to say, and like I said earlier, a day in the life of this world as opposed to, saving a kingdom.
Yeah.
Probably a better way to do an endorsement from me would be to say, so if you ask me what my top 5 favorite series are, I'd be like, okay, well, Pen and Des is on there. Now let me think about the rest of them.
Oh, that's cool. That's very, very cool.
Very good. Very good. Yeah, so go read Pen and Des.
Yes.
I would suggest definitely reading Curse of Chalion and Paladin of Souls before reading these, but you could probably skip Hallowed Hunt. I wouldn't, because I love Hallowed Hunt, but it's not as loved. And it's not as loved by me.
Yeah.
It's
the worst Roll to 5 God books, but that does not make it a bad book.
That's mostly because Ingray is annoying.
He's mopey.
He's
a mopey bastard.
But he has reason to be.
So why is Oswald okay, but Ingray is...
Well, I mean, you know who's not mopey? Kaz. Kaz is not mopey. He has just
Kaz
as much
is
reason
totally
to be
mopey.
I disagree. Whatever.
He just has more characters bringing him about to the positive side.
I guess. Whatever. Todd is totally left out of this conversation now. Sorry about that.
That's a good note.
I'm sitting here and I'm like, yeah, this feels like Thanksgiving dinner. Yeah, okay, that's fine.
Okay. So, thanks so much for joining us tonight. You can join the conversation on Reddit and Discord. We also are on Twitter at Green Team Pod. Please consider supporting the Legendarium via Patreon. The music is Galactic Damages by Jingle Punks. Thanks, Craig, for loaning us a little corner of your media empire. And for Rabbit and Todd, I'm Little Red Book. Good night, y'all.
Bye.
Say good night.
Nice. Good night, Little Red. Where's my harmonica? I've got a harmonica here.
Oh no.
We got their Twitter team pod.
Oh, that's funny.
Oh dear. Okay, now I have to figure out how to make these guys leave and then download.
Oh, hey, that's
Not
easy.
you guys. Craig bought
I
in.
thought you were talking about us.
No.
You'll never take me.